Hey, loves, it's Grace Redman, and thank you for joining me on another episode of Real Talk, where I get to have real life, raw conversations with incredible people from my circles and communities who overcome challenges and create amazing. I just love my job. It's just, I have so much fun and it's so inspiring. And today, my incredible guest is Mike Salemi. Mike is a two-time world champion and performance specialist who helps high performing leaders and entrepreneurs elevate their physical vitality and mental clarity. With over 15 years of experience in elite athletic training, Mike combines strength training, breath work, and mindfulness to support clients in building resilience and enhancing their leadership presence. Through his programs, retreats, and personalized one on one coaching, Mike guides individuals in reconnecting with their inner strength, breaking through personal limitations, and achieving lasting wellness and peak performance. Mike's own journey in strength and conditioning started at the age of 15 as a competitive powerlifter. At the age of 19, Mike became a world champion in the bench press and deadlift. In over 10 years as a coach, working alongside some of the greatest minds in health and performance, Mike has been able to create his own unique system for those seeking a more balanced approach towards achieving their goals. Mike has been featured guest on top podcasts such as Ben Greenfield, and his work has been featured in magazines such as Muscle and Fitness and Iron Man Japan. So please help me welcome Mike Salemi to the show today. Hi, Mike.
Hey, Grace. Good to be here. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for joining me. I'm excited to have our conversation because we speak the same language.
We sure do. Yep. Setting the intentions before the calls and just calling some good energy in. So I'm so excited to be here and to explore with you wherever we go. I'm down.
Oh, I love that. I love the exploration. I love, let's talk about, because you started your, journey and career at such a young age, at the age of 15. So can you talk to us a little bit when most of us at the age of 15 are outside, playing on the playground, like you're preparing to be a world champion. So tell us how that journey started.
Yeah. So, something that my parents did just a really good job and were, I think, wiser than they even knew at the time. And I think in retrospect, it's been more clear, but putting my brother and I into sports. And
Mhm.
so they put us at a really early age. My brother, even younger than me, I think at like 5 years old in gymnastics. And my dad and mom are both immigrants from Sicily, came from the same small town, and they've got a worker's mind and mentality. And so watching that, feeling that, hearing that, and just the intuition that's, I think, fostered in that environment
Mm,
completely transferred into sport. And so from a really young age, my brother and I had a lot of structure, a lot of discipline, but it didn't so much come from my mom and dad. I mean, some of it definitely came, but it was more what they modeled and then
mm,
putting us in a sport like gymnastics. And so, I mean, from a really young age, I mean, we were training 5 to 6 days a week,
wow.
3-ish hours a day, plus playing other sports and being a kid.
Mhm,
So that was like the breeding ground or the soil that we had growing up was this immigrant kind of mentality, work, stay disciplined, loyalty, all those things. And then put us in a gymnastics environment and surround us with just good quality coaches. So my
mhm.
coach at a super young age, I think it was like 9 to 13 or 14, right before I switched to powerlifting, was a two-time Olympian from
Mm.
Bulgaria, Krasimir
Oh,
Dunev. He was the
oh, very
first
cool.
person, the first person in history at the time to do 6 consecutive release moves on the high bar. So
Oh,
that would
wow.
be like where they do a move and they do giants around. So they swing around the bar, then they do some type of acrobatic move in the air as they release, and then they recatch. So he was just, especially in his day, was a phenom and literally looked like a Greek god and
Yeah.
just looked like the pinnacle of health. I mean, this guy, anybody who wants to search Krasimir Dunev online will look and you'll just see he's definitely one of the more physically built gymnasts. And I remember as a kid asking him, Krasimir, what do we have to do to look like you? And the first thing he said, and I must have been, I don't know, 9, 10 years old, is he said, stop eating fast food. There's a fast food, like I'm still in the house right now that for the most of my life I grew up in. My brother and I bought it from my parents. Right down the street, I could see it from here. There's a Taco Bell, or no, they changed ownership, but basically Taco Bell, McDonald's, Pizza Hut's no longer, but some pizza place, and then Carl's Jr. Like
Yeah, I know
literally
exactly
right
the
down.
place you're talking about.
Yes,
Exactly.
that's
My
exactly where I live. Yeah.
Yeah, my kids have gone through that McDonald's drive-through so many times that they're like, "Don't your mama cook?" I'm like, "Yo, mama cooks every night."
Yeah, so that's the one. That's the one. And just having good mentors from a young age, but the only thing is gymnastics is really hard on the body. Like very hard.
Imagine.
I think developmentally it's one of the best sports there is for a young kid for body awareness, confidence, flexibility, mobility, strength, all of those things. And just being a kid who is also growing and having his own challenges, I had a pinched nerve in my lower back. So
Mm,
that took me out of gymnastics. And then the person who rehabbed me was a multiple time world champion on the bench press. He was a
wow.
chiropractor. And so that was like at a very summarized version, that was my entry point into powerlifting and completing. But I just grew up in an environment where it was just more the norm, like I didn't really know. It might
Any
sound strange, I didn't really know anything else other than my friends who were doing other things, but this is what I knew at home, my parents, the coaches, my brother. So that was by and large the whole environment that I was raised in.
So that's incredible because they do say you are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And so at a young age, you and your brother were surrounded by, world champions and elite performers. So it
Absolutely.
makes so it makes sense. Now it makes sense because like you said, you didn't know any better, which again goes back to really emphasizing really be mindful on who you're spending your time with because you became a two-time world champion and then some.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. When I think even back to it, even before I was working with Krasimir Dunev, my brother and I were both athletes at Stanford University, and our family, and I think it was 5 other families, started their boys program there. So
Wow.
way back when. And at the time, the young kids athletic training and the kids programs would happen. Sometimes it would overlap, but usually right after the college kids, not college kids, but the college guys would train. So as a kid, you would see these college guys training hard. And there was Jair Lynch, who was a silver medalist, I think in Atlanta, if I don't recall correctly. I think it was Atlanta on the parallel bars. So you're a kid looking up to, and then in those years as well, that was the heyday of women's gymnastics too.
Mm.
So you had Shannon Miller, you had uh, I don't remember her first name, but her brother was a gymnast. But Kevin Chow's sister, I think it was Amy Chow. That was Carrie Shrub, the one who did the vault and like broke her ankle. You had all of those athletes, by and large, many of them at Stanford University. So imagine being a kid
Backyard.
and just looking and witnessing greatness all day, every day. You said something beautiful, like you are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And I think in the recent years, especially with the more emotional work that I do in coaching, I don't know if I shared this with you, but I really love this saying, you are the sum of the 5 nervous systems you spend the
Oh,
most time with. So
that's powerful.
so imagine if you're spending time around high anxiety,
Mhm.
fear-based thinking, just horrible mental self-talk. There's no way that's not going to not only impact your psychology, but your nervous system state.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I need to spend quite a bit of time, by myself in nature. I put the chanting on. So I make sure that, because it's been a chaotic world,
Mhm.
regardless of, where you are, it has been a chaotic world. And so I love how you talked about you are the sum of the people in their nervous systems, because I feel like I have to spend time in solitude a lot more now than I have before to regulate my nervous system, to make sure that I stay grounded and that I can, continue to show up in my peak, performance at my peak performance levels.
Yeah. I think having that awareness is one of the awareness is the first step for anything, not only in the change process, but without that awareness, then that's how you get insomnia. You can't sleep at
Right.
night. You can't turn off your head. There's so many people with high levels of anxiety, high levels of fear, don't know how to deal with their anger. And all of these emotions are very normal. However, if we stay stuck in them too long, we don't realize it, and then we're putting ourselves in an environment. I mean, here's another analogy. When there's a sick fish, what do? You clean the fish bowl, right? You don't give the fish medicine, you clean the environment it's in.
Oh, I
So
love that
if if
metaphor.
if all we did was adjust, I'm not saying it's the only thing, but it's a big part of it.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
100%. I've completely changed my life and my lifestyle. They After a health crisis 2 years ago, they told me I would never be the same again, and I refused to believe that. And so now 2 years later, I feel better than I ever have at the age of 54, better than when I was 30, better than I was 40. And like you just said, I had to make a lot of changes with what I put into my body, what I watch, what I listen to, who I surround myself with, how I move my body. I mean, I've been working out since I was 19 years old. However, the last 2 years I've had to, just focus on a different type of workout. So I'm totally with you on, everything that you're saying.
Mm. Yeah, you said something I think that is just spot on that many people don't put, too much focus on, and it's the consumption of what we hear, whether it's
Mm.
in the news, the books we read, the music that we listen to. I had with all the guys coming to the retreats that I run, I do one-on-one calls with each guy, usually 1 to 2 beforehand to really get some level of clarity on where are they at, what's really the pain that they're going through or something that they want to shift. And we get to unpack some of those things. And I remember one gentleman was just sharing the types, I don't know how it came up, but the types of music, and it was like just heavy kind of satanic music. And just imagine, like if that's the music he wants to listen to, great, fine, all good. And like you
And
can't help but tell me that if you're listening to heavy, dark, satanic music for hours on in a day, that's not gonna impact your nervous system, your vibe, like what gets programmed into you. So it's a really big call up to look at all levels, what we consume, how we consume, our relationship to that consumption, because it does make a difference.
it does. I was floored because I thought I was living, a great life, and I had good habits. And then it's not to judge myself. I just didn't really there's always room for improvement. And when you talk about, high performance, I started really diving into the high performers, and you can really refine a lot of what you're doing to feel even better.
Mm.
So I love how so I, have 2 sons and, a husband, and it's important, their mental health, emotional, mental, physical, spiritual health is so important to me. And I feel as a society that we haven't um, given men the permission to be open about maybe their emotions or how they're feeling, which as a result creates the stress, the anxiety, the is illness. What I love about you is that you've created a space for men to come together to gain that awareness and to really do the deep dives to step into that peak performance.
Yeah, that's a big part of what I do today is to whether it's in one-on-one sessions or in online programs or in retreats. And there really is no substitute for an in-person interaction when you've got someone in front of you. But to your point, now there's everyone's going through their own issues in life and their own challenges, and there's some very common themes. I would say 8 times out of 10 when I'm hopping on discovery calls and guys are coming to the retreats, 8 times out of 10, some things come up as patterns. One of which is this pattern that I mean, we're all human beings. We all go through these things, anger,
Sure.
fear, all of these shame. And yet
Yes.
so many men are suffering in silence. They don't know. I mean, I've had female partners reach out. This has happened on more than once that they've caught their husband or whatever crying in the shower. And they're like, I don't know what to do. Like, can you help him? Like, it's so clear and evident that they're in pain. And yet They don't have, maybe they've got friends that they've known for years. And I'm not saying like they have siblings and good relationships, but I know men are craving for depth. Men are craving for connection. And oftentimes all they hear is you need to be more vulnerable. Okay, there's value in vulnerability, but most men don't know beyond that, or even like a structure for that. So then all of a sudden they dump their heart out on their partners, and the
Mm,
partners doesn't even know how to handle that. So in these containers, it's not only giving men an opportunity and a permission to share in community, but also what else is a part of that puzzle, and even how to do that in a way that sets them up for success. Because
I love
if they've never been given the tools, and then all of a sudden, okay, it's okay to be angry, and then they lash out, and then the partner's like, whoa, where did this come from?
it.
It's a full,
Confusing.
it's confusing, it's a projection, and sometimes projections are true. But I think
Mhm.
it's also helping men know that there's more to that puzzle, even though the vulnerability is a big piece, but there's also some frameworks and some ways you can enter that in a healthier way.
And I love that because it's so necessary. Because what I've seen, not only, for men, but for us women, we get into we're conditioned to, to be successful, right? So then we hustle and grind. And I've learned, back when the hustle and grind men, you didn't show emotion. Like, if you
Mm.
showed emotion, you were weak. If you took breaks, you were weak. And the other thing I love about what you're teaching is there's a harmonious way to do it. Like, because if you continue to hustle and grind and you're not, sharing how you're feeling, that's a recipe for disaster, which I know I've been there. And I know that you shared a little bit about that as well. So how can we create success, internal and external success harmoniously?
Yeah, this is such a good question. So in many regards, whether it's high achievers, performers, athletics, business, whatever, that story that you just shared, that there's a propensity or a pattern that I need to set aside my emotions
Mhm.
because they're like speed bumps or roadblocks. Like I don't have time to feel
Right.
because it gets in the way of myself kicking ass, getting stuff done, setting goals, executing. And look, like I get that. And if that goes on too long, something's going to suffer. And in those populations that I work with and see this very common, two things tend to happen. There's other things, but these are by far the biggest two. One, their intimate and family relationships suffer, like it comes at a cost. The second thing is they will burn out.
Mhm.
So it's one of those two things that are likely going to happen. So it's not to say that kicking butt and being a high achiever, there's nothing wrong with that. But if that comes at the expense of time for you and your kids, and like, what are you working for? So I really think it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And it's
Yes.
not to say like, look, I'm speaking even in my own experience. A lot of what I've learned came through kicking butt, competing. Like I love challenge, like I really do. And what I realized is if I'm over indexing on whether it's training or business or work, there's going to be a cost to that.
For
So
sure.
the first thing is to understand there's nothing wrong with wanting to be a high achiever and be at the top of your game, like to express your human potential. But if
Mm.
you've got a major blind spot and you're not acknowledging the fact that you're a human being with thoughts, feelings, emotions, and the how vital it is for our health to be in relationship with each other and to be in healthy relationship, in my opinion, you're missing or someone's missing a big piece of the puzzle. So
I agree.
how do your question to how do we do this in a healthy way? So um one concept that I would love to share is um a framework that can be extrapolated to a whole, like a million different applications.
Mm.
And it's the recognition that now we can use different names if these names are triggering to people. Like we can use a few different names, but masculine, feminine, all right, not gender specific. Like there's a masculine and a feminine in me. There's a masculine and feminine
Yeah.
energy. We can use
Yeah.
yin and yang. You can use alpha, omega. So if for
I
whatever
love
reason,
the feminine energy. That
perfect.
resonates.
Okay. So, and if anyone's like, the idea is to get beyond the words and to really just tune in, like you said, to the energy
Right.
of the
Because we all
message.
have masculine and feminine energy. All of us, regardless of gender.
Exactly. Right. And some of us have more of a masculine essence than a feminine essence. And you can even go deeper with some of us have more of a masculine, like you can look at it from your physical body. You can look at it from your emotional body, your mental body, your spiritual body. Each one of those subsets, we could have more of a masculine physical body, but more of a feminine emotional body. So
Yes.
you can look at it in any way you want. But when it comes to a lot of what we do at these events, retreats, and in the coaching, it's so let me take one step back. So the masculine principle, at least through the lineage that I've learned and how I practice and what I teach, the masculine is, so I've got a glass cup right here. So the masculine is the container. The masculine is the integrity, is the structure, is what holds. Okay. The water on the inside is the
Mhm.
feminine.
The
So anything
flow.
is the flow. So if the
Mhm.
if the masculine is the mountain, the feminine is the river. So if
Oh,
we were to look at this, the masculine is the framework, the structure, the container that holds the feminine. And the feminine in practicality is anything associated with movement. So thinking, feeling, sensing, behaving, anything like that, all the feeling, all the senses, that is our natural feminine. The masculine is stillness, is consciousness, is the witness, is the
mhm,
container. So a lot of what we do in these retreats or in the work that I do, it's to provide a very safe, solid container for
mhm,
men to come together and for their feminine to have permission, to have space. Because if this container, for example, like if you can imagine like a colander, like a pasta colander with a bunch of leaks or
mhm.
holes, if I've got many holes in it, it's not going to hold our own feminine. So it's going to
Right,
be less trustable. There's going to be less integrity. So there's many different frameworks, and I'm happy to share a few of them, but that's really the concept. So that here's the thing. I'll give you one example. Um, so if I were to put you or a guy, because this can be used for male and female as well, if I were to put you in a challenging position. So are you familiar with like horse stance, like just a wide squat
yes.
stance? Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
So imagine that. That sucks. That's
Yeah, for
like
a long period of
for
time
long
does.
periods of time, that really sucks, right? So you can take the horse stance, and then it's a movement in qigong. It's called the qi generator. But imagine being in a horse stance at whatever depth or whatever level you want, and then holding your arms up like you're hugging a beach ball. And if anyone who's watching this who can just picture, so my hands are as if I'm holding a big beach ball. My elbows are right in line with my wrists, right in line with my shoulders. And I'll have men hold that. They'll hold that position. And there's some cueing and there's some music to help to give them encouragement. And a lot of times we do partner practices because we can really support each guy if like, in those moments of difficulty. But here's the thing, what ends up happening. The posture itself, right? The position, the stance, the depth, the arm position, and that structure is a part of the masculine container.
Mm,
But as you're holding it, as your alignment, your positioning, all of that, your breath, like all of that is the meticulousness of the posture, the container that you're holding. But as you hold longer and longer, the discomfort sets in.
yes.
The burn sets in. Then the thoughts like, oh my gosh, when is this going to end? Oh my gosh, this hurts. Oh my,
Mhm.
then you start popping out like, oh, okay, what do I have to do today? Oh my gosh, when is he going to shut up with his cueing?
Ah,
When is this going to be over? Oh, again, this hurts. So all of that self-talk, the feeling, the sensing, the burn is a no BS way to feel your feminine. So the practice is, how can we train men's and just people in general, but for the masculine training, how can we train our nervous systems to hold more of our own feminine, and then as a byproduct anybody else, but how can we hold more of our feminine without collapsing, without shutting down? Even
mm,
in the midst of every part of me wants my arms to drop, can I be heart opened? And
mm,
that is a practice, but with every practice, there's a practice underneath the practice. So
ooh, tell me.
if that and that's really what we're getting to. So if I see a man who's holding this and then all of a sudden they drop their arms and then they beat themselves up, all of that, the question after is, well, one, what came up for you? What did you learn in
Yeah.
that practice? What is your relationship to that? And by and large, what's going on in that practice is also being mirrored outside in their intimate relate. Every time I get into a fight or a heated conflict with my intimate partner, I shut down. I want to collapse. I close my heart. I want to run away. I check out. So we use grounded, just practical exercises, not in all the things, but that's one example. And over time, you can actually create a shift in the nervous system so that you can hold more of your own feminine. And then in your partner, is when she's sharing her heart and her frustrations or her joys, you can hold her. You hold the pose with an open heart. And so that's, I'll pause there, but that's a concept that can be extrapolated into so many different practices.
That's so good, because what you were getting to in that pose, and once they couldn't hold it anymore, like you said, there's the layers was like the unconscious, and then what was that about? And so then you also talk about, is that one of the practices you use to help people shift the stories?
The story, it can be the story work practices and the story work framework. It's a very specific framework, and I'm happy to go into that. But in that practice, I mean, when we talk about mindset, if you were to ask, I don't know, 100 people what is mindset, you'd probably get 100 different
For
answers,
sure.
right?
For sure.
So the definition that I really like is our mindset is just simply the stories we tell ourselves. We're
Mhm.
always telling ourselves a story, whether we can do something, we can't do something, what this person, how they make us feel, or what we're always telling ourselves story, business, whatever. What do the numbers mean? So when it comes to story work, there's a framework, but even in that posture, there's a story, there's a narrative going on. And so it's
Oh,
it's it's in that place, that threshold, because especially so the masculine in all of us, male or female, grows through challenge. The
mm,
feminine in all of us grows through praise. And so as we're beginning to shift this relationship with our stories, our narrative, and our mindset, I don't know any other way to actually create a meaningful shift without some degree of conflict, where you're meeting some part of yourself or something that you're out of your comfort zone. So when we get men or anybody in that place of discomfort, and then you have another man in front of them or a whole group doing the same thing, and you've got some cueing going on to train them to, like, hey, even though you want to quit, even though you want to shut down, can you use your imagination
mm,
and your feeling body to actually relax and
mm,
open? And so you are doing story work. It's just through a slightly different approach.
mm.
But I'm
Well,
happy to share that other framework too.
I love the story work, because I also work on the stories with my clients as well. And something I love that you said, like, it's really uncomfortable. Well,
Yeah.
that's the first, piece is, getting really honest with yourself. And that typically is very uncomfortable, because the stories that you've been telling yourself have got you to where you are. However, they're not going to sustain you from here to there.
Yes. Yes.
That's when we begin to fall apart. Um, something, I love that you use breath work as well. Sometimes I don't breathe, Mike. Like, I find I'm like, oh my God, stop, breathe. What are you doing? Um, can you kind of maybe teach us one technique that we can use to help us focus a little bit better?
Yeah, absolutely. And would it be okay if I integrated the story work with the breath, because they work hand in hand? So, all right, so
Absolutely.
here's the thing. There's a million and one breath techniques. Like, there's many breath techniques as there are yoga postures, and I'll absolutely give some really solid one, two, or three to take away. But I want to integrate this with the stories, because here's the thing. Um like, even when it comes to reframing or finding the light side and the positive or self-celebration, all really important things, but unless the cleanup's been done, unless we've gone into the pain or begin exploring that and act, because here's the thing, most people's stories are chocked full of self-limiting beliefs, of assumptions, of interpretations, of a really mean and harsh inner critic. And so these stories of the past, part of why affirmations or mantras many times don't work or don't land is because the cleanup hasn't been done before, and the breath is trapped high in the chest. So
Mm,
someone could be saying an affirmation, but their body doesn't believe it. Their nervous system doesn't believe it.
mhm.
So with the cleanup, most people's stories, like if here's the story of, I'm just going to use just my parents' divorce, or when I went bankrupt, or the last relationship when I got cheated on, these impactful events that are stored in the body,
Yep.
they're so close. They're literally like right in front of our face. They almost become merged into our consciousness and our awareness. So what ends up happening, there's no way to heal, my knowledge, there's no way to heal anything unless you can create separation,
So good.
unless you can begin unmerging from the story to actually step into instead of being a participant in the story, now you're being a witness. And
Mhm.
once you do that, and then you get, because most of these stories,
Are
like,
false.
are, what's that?
They're false. They're not even true.
They're not even true. Yeah, but we believe them as true, right? And
Mhm.
so if the body is doing that, and then the breath, because like at least through I'm curious what's been your experience. What I've seen is the inherited like many stories are inherited, our money stories. There's so many of these patterns, and we inherit not only many of our parents' stories, and then later we become compliant or defiant to it, but we inherit those stories, but we also inherit our parents' breathing rhythms. And
Oh,
so
I had
if
no idea.
well, if your mom's a very anxious person, going back to like largely like that is the environment in which we grew up in. So there's a high likelihood that we're going to carry on that. So if you have a story, a money story, like for me, my money story was money is confusing. And I could give you a whole list of examples of what I either saw, heard, felt, or intuited that prove that in my experience. Right. And so with my relationship with money or intimate relationships in the past, like women can't be trusted or whatever, because I was hurt in the past, all of that, those memories of the past are also not only stuck in the nervous system, but our breathing rhythm is stuck in sympathetic. So as we're beginning to rewrite the stories, first, in my experience, we have to go back, we have to unmerge, we have to begin separating, and we got to get the breath out of the chest into the belly and
Oh,
begin down regulating. And then once we've cleaned the house, then we can throw the party. So when
I
we
love
celebrate, and
that.
that
Oh.
and so there's a lot of value in self, and men have a hell of a time. They can celebrate others, and it's so funny when I lead these events, we do usually some type of praise practice at the end to celebrate another man for what they saw, and they're all giving the guys props, giving really specific, when you did this, man, I saw you shift and it shifted something in me. And but then when it comes to them self-celebrating and sharing that, it's literally crickets, because it's
Mm,
so hard. And so there's also growth in there as well. And that's our way to acknowledge our own feminine. But
mm.
we first clean the house, then we throw the party. And the three components of this are the breath, because without the breath, there's no rewriting of the story,
Oh,
our language internally and externally. And then the third thing is our posture. Because if your heart is collapsed, even if you're saying, I am enough, I am enough, your body's not going to believe that. So it requires breath,
mm.
posture, and
Posture.
language internal. Yeah, the posture, your ability to embody that
Mm.
new story or release the past.
I love the word embody, because that's I've been learning to, okay, Grace, embody, your future self. I didn't realize that our breath had something to do with it as well. Like, I've never heard that. So this is so fascinating for me. I love
It's
that. Makes
without
sense.
the breath,
Mm,
it's missing a major element, because the breath is the quickest thing. Going into like a breath technique, the breath is the quickest thing and arguably one of the most powerful
mm.
things to change the state of your nervous system.
You're so right. You're so right. Because when I find myself getting activated, the first thing I do is I tell myself, okay, Grace, stop, step back, take a breath. So interesting.
And that piece that you just said, so I'll actually, it's not a very good piece of artwork, but this
All
is,
right.
I
Well,
was
here.
teaching my men's group, but Well,
I
it's not
can't
even showing, but it's basically it's a triangle that says language, breath, and posture. And in the center, there's a big word that says pause.
pause.
So like what you just said, stop, to create a pattern break. We're
Mhm.
always in these habitual cyclical patterns of, a stimulus happens, someone says something, and then we filter that through our own belief system. And then
Right.
we have some type of reaction or response.
That's right.
Between the stimulus and the response, there's a space. There's like a
Mhm.
space in between. And a big part in my experience of self-healing, self-growth happens in the magic of that space in between. So even if
Oh,
we just paused and did nothing else, I
mm.
would guarantee that we start having a different relationship to that trigger or to whatever it is.
What do you think that what do you think happens during that pause? Is that the divine the divine energy flows through us? Like what happens in that pause to create the magic?
Mm, if there is, like, if that is a possibility to allow the divine, or like if that does resonate with someone, they can feel that. I think what the pause is doing is making them more sensitive to that.
Mm,
Like it's
more
opening
open.
them up to that possibility, into that flow of energy, right? So the pause is a place for down regulating the nervous system, to stop, to also
Mhm.
create, because so many of our thoughts, once again, are repetitive. Like not only they're repetitive, but they basically rhyme over and over and over.
Totally. And they're
So
habits. It's a
they're
habit.
it's a habit. It
Mhm.
can be broken. And so even in
Yes,
one-on-one sessions, a lot of what I'll do respectfully, sometimes will have to be to interrupt a man,
for
and
sure.
he'll go off on a story. I'll be like, just take a moment. Won't even say anything, but let's just take a breath together. And then all of a sudden, new possibilities open up. They down regulate. They can get their breath from high and tight and shallow in the chest into low and slow in the belly. They can adjust their posture, because that in body piece, I would say in the last 3 years, it's been the biggest. Before that, it was the breath. Well, before that, it was the words in the language, learning as much as I could, and that still never ends. Then it was the breath, and now it's the embodiment. And I really do believe it's all of those things, because
I believe
if
that.
without the embody, like everything can and should be embodied, everything. So with the
Believe that.
story work, with like, what would, I'll guide men through. So let's say they're trying to create a new possibility for themselves. Let's just say I lead my family powerfully. Let's say like
Mhm.
that's the condensed version of, after we've done some cleanup and we've really gotten to the heart of it, and what do they really want? I want to lead my family powerfully. So you could guide them through, or even just a man or anybody who's listening to this, just stand,
Mm,
unlock your knees, separate your arms, like in yoga, like tree pose. But
mm.
imagine yourself like you've got roots growing through the soles of your feet, and your fingertips are plugging into the earth. Your breath is low, it's slow, it's deep. And then actually take the physical form of those words. How would someone move about the world? How would someone walk? How would someone dress? How would someone act who leads their family with love and powerfully? And you can start shifting these stories through the body.
Yep.
And that's the integration piece, or a big part of it as well.
Yeah, I love that because it's a pattern interrupt. So you interrupt the pattern, then you create the new vision and you stay in that because our mind doesn't know the difference. So I've learned, but I know it needs practice. Like you have to continue to interrupt that pattern to create the new neural pathways. It's
Yes.
fascinating and it can be I've seen miracles happen. So that's why I'm so passionate about this work and I loved, I love having you on because this is the language that I speak and the message that needs to be heard because people believe that this is how my life is, this is how it's always been, and it's never going to change, which is not true. It's not true. I've seen miracles in my own life and, the lives of people around me who do this work. So tell me, share with us one of, an ad, an- you know, an ad, an adversity that you went through and how you overcame it
That's a good
to,
question.
because a lot of times we think, oh my gosh, this is something tragic that's happening, yet it's really happening for us. So can you share one of your experiences? and how it benefited you.
Yeah, and I think anything, absolutely, absolutely. I'm loving this conversation. This is what fires me up. So,
Love it.
and with regards to tragedies, like yes, there very much are big T traumas and what we would most associate with, you know, divorce or infidelity. Like there's big someone dies. Like yes, there's big T traumas, and there's also little T traumas. There's, you know, even with the money story as an example, that I shared earlier, money is confusing. Like that was never told to me. My parents never said that. And in fact, around me, they didn't really talk about money much. But as children, we learn via what we hear, what we see, what we feel, and what we can intuit. And so it may not even been anything that's said, but if that is the money story, or again, women can't be trusted, or women are going to cheat on me, if there was something that I experienced or felt or heard or intuitive, and I internalize that, then that is going to be my new perception of reality. And that is going to be what informs my worldview. And then once again, you add on all of the things like the environment, the people we surround ourselves with, what we consume, and we will attract, and oftentimes it'll reinforce, unless we're curious enough and courageous enough
Yes,
to seek something out. Like courage and curiosity, I think, and commitment are the three things that are the anecdote and the medicine to so many of this.
I
So,
agree.
a challenge that I overcame. One of the biggest ones. There's a few big ones in my life that were really telling, and it was one of which was, trying to think, about 8 years ago. 8 years ago, I'd always been coaching, since I was unofficially, since I was 15-ish years old, but officially when I was 18. And then about 8 years ago, there was a time frame where I was working in my family business, and that was in the marble and granite industry. And I had come in at the time that the economy and whatever, like '07, '08 ish,
Yep.
when it had crashed. So
Hmm.
the company and the business that had largely funded my dreams, put me through school, all of that, was in a really tough time. And so being in an Italian family, I started in the beginning saying like loyalty is is a big thing in family. And I think a lot of my individuation process has been to, um, let go of the blind loyalty to
Mm.
family values that aren't necessarily my own, and also honor the ones that are and do resonate, but to really have the courage to individuate and see what's important to me. What do I really believe in, with respect, with mom and dad, and can I be courageous enough to follow my own dream? And so when I was 30, I
Mm.
got to the point where I was like, this is, I mean, I knew it wasn't my dream, but I was in it for, again, it supported me financially. It allowed me to work with some of the best coaches in the world. It was a successful business, and really grew into a very successful business that they sold recently. Um, but doing marble and granite sales I just knew was not what I'm meant here to do.
It wasn't your
So
purpose. I mean, it
it
served
wasn't
a purpose, but it wasn't your purpose.
it was definitely on, and is definitely on, my path, and it took me a long time to have the maturity to look back and to let go of the resentment and all of the stuff that I had built up and what I made it mean. Because when I was in it, and oftentimes when we're in it, we're so myopic with our view. The aperture is so, we're in a survival state. And
Yes.
so I just realized like this is just not what I meant to do. And it went on for 8 years.
Mm.
And so leaving the business was one of the most, in many regards, was some of the most challenging things that I ever had to experience. Because even in the lifting realm, like I had many injuries, like competing at a high level or in performance in general, the risk of injury goes up when you're volume and you're
Oh,
training and you're there to win. And I would argue to say that the emotional stuff, like the feeling, uh, excommunicated from family, or
I can
like
feel you on that. Been there. I hear you.
that is the heaviest weights that we'll ever lift, in my opinion. So I've had, like anybody, we've all had our own hero's journey, and so I've definitely had those in many regards, but that was really a pivotal turning point where I had to learn to let go of the values that I had inherited that were no longer in alignment with the man that I am and was becoming, and also recognizing like I've really got some dreams here to support men in healing that lineage, that generational cycle from father to son, father to son. So that whole experience was very painful, very painful. Um, and I don't know if I would have the same level of determination, uh, appreciation, and gratitude for not only what I'm doing, but also the good things that my parents did and
Mm,
all of that if I didn't go through that hero's journey.
so beautiful. Thank you so much for
Mm,
sharing that.
you're
Because
welcome.
it's that struggle is real. I experienced, a similar struggle in stepping away from the cultural norms and being isolated. So I appreciate you sharing that because I see it in a different light. And then you don't feel so alone either. And so now that you look back at, I know it was a very painful experience, how did that experience grow you?
Mm. My well, one, I even said when I was working in that line of work that I told myself, and I still feel this is very true today, I will never take for granted the ability to do what I know I'm here to do, or I'm meant to do, and just following my heart. I will never take that for granted. And so that level of appreciation and gratitude to now having created, I have a family, so I support us financially right now. I've got a beautiful son who's almost 2 years old, wife who cares for him beautifully. And this is the roles that we've chosen we're having in this phase of life. And I get to do that. And not only do I
Yes.
get to do that, but the way I get to do that
Mm,
is through watching and witnessing and creating quote unquote containers to heal the same cycles that I'm here to break, and also to reinforce the good ones. Because it's not like, just as much as one of my mentors would say, just as much as we're in the spell casting business, so we're also in the spell breaking business. So to
yes.
break those generational spells or patterns, so it's not only provided a tremendous amount of appreciation and gratitude and conviction, and purpose,
Yes.
um,
Mm,
but it's also, it was just a major moment in my individuation process of like really looking back at what are my values that I'm here willing to live and die for, some of which overlap with what I imagine my parents are, how I've observed them live, and some of them are uniquely mine. And so it's
yes.
just given me more appreciation than anything else. And I would definitely wouldn't change it. And I don't know if I would choose to go through it again, but I
Oh,
definitely wouldn't change it.
that's powerful.
Mm.
And very powerful. It's funny you say that because as I look back on my journey and all of the challenges I faced, it was very painful. And when I look back, same thing. I'm like, gosh, how did I get through that? I definitely wouldn't do that now, but it got us here. It's been incredible. I can't believe that it's like we're at 48
Oh,
minutes.
oh my god.
It felt like 10 minutes, which means like you need to come back because there's so much
I
more
would
that we
love
need
that.
to talk about that we didn't touch on. Thank you so much for everything that you're doing for our community and to help break the cycles and to create, healthy men and boys in our community. So please, can you let people know where they can find you and how they can work with you?
Yes, this has been such a pleasure, and
Fun.
we're bringing this to a close with just like so much excitement and just a lot of energy. So, uh, where people can find me, best place is, I would say, Instagram, which is just my handle is at Mike.Salemi, Salemi. My website is mikesalemi.io, not .com. I have a podcast called The Path with Mike Salemi, and I run retreats for men. I have online programs, and I do one-on-one coaching for both men and women in both the inner work realm, but also obviously due to my background, there is an outer, like there's the yin and the yang. So like the
Mm,
outer physical work, the embodiment work, just to feel good in our bodies, and then to have this inner work, the stories and the capacity, and just the nervous system regulation to manage life, and not just manage life, to thrive in life. So if anybody's interested in one-on-one coaching, just hit me up via Instagram, look me up through my website, and I would love to have a chat.
Yeah, and we'll also share your information, at the end. So all of your information will be there as well. And of course, if you are watching the replay, listening, please don't hesitate to reach out. I can also get you in touch with Mike, but you will definitely be able to find him. Mike, thank you so much for joining me. That was so fun. I appreciate you. And for those of you watching and listening or on the replay, thank you so much for joining us. Please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, we wish you an incredible, incredible day. Keep thriving. All right, y'all. Have a great one. Mike, hang on with me.